Lynched on CTV, proudly brought to you by Christchurch's #1 dining offer, Sequoia 88 at the Redwood Hotel, a food concept unequalled. Good evening. One of Christchurch's worst affected suburbs following the quakes was, of course, over on the east, a proud Labour area, but perhaps no more. National took out the party vote. What is going on? Tonight, Labour's Poto Williams joins me, and Lynched starts right now. Good evening to you. Well, Poto Williams kept her seat on the Christchurch East, but the party vote, as we know, went back to National again. So what happened? Well, did the Labour Party fail to offer a strong alternative solution for our second largest city right here in New Zealand, or was it a case of better the devil you know? Well, let's ask Poto Williams, who joins me this evening. Good evening to you.
Hi Chris, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Thanks so much for coming in to Lynched. Was it a case, do you think, of better the devil you know?
Look, it's really interesting. I think that we have to give the national government the benefit of actually having moved people along. There's lots of people who are still involved in a lot of earthquake issues, but a lot of people have come through that. And yes, I think rather than better the devil you know, there is a sense of people understanding where the process is going. Labour was offering alternatives, and possibly for some people they were just not what they wanted, perhaps a little bit too radical, perhaps they didn't understand what our point of view was. I don't know. We are, certainly reeling from the result on the weekend, and we've got a lot of questions to answer.
Were you surprised by just how much of a thrashing Labour got, particularly in the Christchurch suburbs?
I have to say, what I was getting on the ground was quite different from the result we got on the weekend, and maybe that's because we were asking the wrong people, and perhaps we were asking the wrong questions.
Does that suggest perhaps Labour is becoming more and more out of touch then with Christchurch voters?
Yeah, look, I have to say, what it signals to me is that we got the messages wrong.
What message do you think Labour did get wrong?
Well,
if you can reflect and have a...
Yeah, look, of course, this will come out in the fullness of our review that we're going to do, but I think just off the top of my head and post-election, some of the things we were offering were perhaps a bit too radical, and people, say for example, our idea of earthquake court, people were actually saying we want solutions for right now, not something that's going to take 6 months to a year to gear up. And, they knew the process they were engaged in right now. And that might have been for us where we lost people. It was perhaps, in the detail, in how it was going to happen, how we were going to resource it, that kind of stuff.
You see, the trouble is Labour failing to deliver policies for middle New Zealand? Because I say that when I was hosting, Newstalk ZB radio programs, I was getting a lot of media releases through from Labour and National, and to be fair, actually both parties. Both parties, for me, did not offer me policies for hard-working middle New Zealanders. You either had to be really poor, really rich, or a pregnant woman to get any, sense of policy that was aimed at them. There was nothing in it for middle New Zealand.
I remember you and I had a bit of a conversation, and I know you spoke with Phil Twyford when he was here on a couple of his visits.
I like Phil.
Yeah, so do I. What perhaps we didn't articulate very well was that we had a couple of key programs that we're going to deliver into the regions. Things like Kiwi Board, for example, which was bold, was about not only regenerating the cities but regenerating the regions as well, and had impacts for businesses and for manufacturers and suppliers. I don't know that we developed those messages strongly enough, or that people actually were hearing what we were saying, because we were hoping to really transform a sector of our community that would have benefits for a whole range of people, including those people you talk about.
Did Labour go too marginal? Because Clayton Cosgrove said something along the lines of Labour has been trying too hard to cater for small interest groups. I think what he's meaning, without saying it, is minority.
Labor has always had a strength in supporting the most vulnerable, and I think our policies were really clear about wanting to do that, and we were very strong on our views around inequality.
Absolutely, but there's nothing new in that, though. I mean, we all know that that's perhaps more, Labor's stronghold, but we know that. But what I didn't hear was, what are you going to do for working New Zealanders?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think what our message didn't really get across was that our program was actually very far-reaching, but our messaging about how far-reaching that was didn't actually come through. Let's also think about just the noise that was going on at the time. We were producing policies quite consistently week after week. There was a new policy coming out, and that was great. But balance that against the noise of everything else that was going on in this election. And if you have a look at National, they had a few policies, but they were actually very, their approach, their communication was quite different to ours, and we were up against a whole lot of other things.
But to be fair on you, though, they didn't offer anything new either, really, in terms of it was steady as she goes.
Yeah.
And perhaps Kiwis like that. But I want to ask you this tough question. Looking back now, we live in extraordinary times where there's a sense of presidential elections. It's a Cunliffe against Key. Do you think Cunliffe needs to take some responsibility in terms of his leadership? There are many people that suggest that he was just insincere. He didn't connect with voters, Potter Williams.
If you look at his relationship to our membership and our core base, he's got a very strong base with our membership. But you're right around the presidential style. John Key is a very, he's been Prime Minister for, this is his third term now. He's our most popular. So we were always going to have, we were always going to be up against it. Just, around that presidential style stuff, that's a new form of politics for us. I'm not making any excuses about that at all. What you say about the simplicity of the message is right. John Key has delivered for many New Zealanders, and people want stability. They want to know that their government's going to deliver stable, sound economic platforms, that kind of thing. And I can understand why in troubled times it's difficult for people to move away from what they know.
So do you accept then it's not a case of opposition's winning, it's a case of government's losing? And do you accept that Labor will just have to sit tight and wait for the shine or the gloss to come off National then?
I think
And is that good enough?
No, and I think what we fail to do is actually win the hearts and minds of people. I know our policies are sound, but I think we fail to win the hearts and minds of people, and that's the unfortunate thing. They didn't see, they have a sense of where we are as a party. We really need to get back to those core values and actually demonstrate all through the party that we believe those principles
to be true. But before you get back to the core values of Labor and what your clear message is going to be, you've got to sort out your internal stuff, don't you? Do you accept the public perception is, and this is completely true, isn't it, the party ain't united?
Well,
and that must be frustrating for you in Christchurch when you're trying to deal with all the palaver up in Wellington.
Yeah. Well, look, let's face it, there's lots of us that are really hurting over what happened during the election, and we all, bar no one, worked extremely hard around wanting to win this election. We got the messaging wrong. We didn't win the hearts and minds of people. We've got some real questions to ask, not only of our leadership but of ourselves.
Well, we can leave all that kind of stuff to the networks, but I think here in local television it is still important to actually concentrate on the local issues facing us here in Christchurch. So after the break, the issues facing Christchurch residents, and is the housing crisis actually improving? Stay with us. Welcome back to Lynched on CTV. My guest tonight is Christchurch East MP Potter Williams. Potter, you must be humbled. It must have been a double-edged sword for you last Saturday night, or the Saturday night before last, because you won the Christchurch East seat. The party vote went to Labor. Ruth Dyson won her seat back again. The party vote went to National, rather. Same with Megan Woods. So in a way, it must be nice, though, that Christchurch residents and voters can still recognise hard-working Labor MPs, even if they don't subscribe to their party values. It still went to National. So how did you feel knowing on that Saturday night you got your seat back, you kept your seat, but it still went blue? Yeah,
bittersweet really. I wanted to celebrate the fact that our hard work and the hard work in the community had paid off, and that's what I had always promised to do, work hard in the community. But just the failure to get across the line. I thought, with all the street corner meetings and all the door knocking that we were doing, that people would think about Labour as an option for the party vote. So not to get the party vote was disappointing. And yes, Ruth and Megan, they worked extraordinarily hard and deservedly so to win their seats. I do have to say that, and I know this is slicing and dicing the numbers though, but we actually staunched the party flow to National in Christchurch East, and we've made a slight turn back to Labour, which is really good. It's something that we can work on. So I think if we can just build on that for the next election, that's great. That's great for us.
Interesting though, the Dirty Politics book, in my view, it didn't sway voters. In fact, it probably forced more national voters out. The Fat German had absolutely no sway in the political landscape. If anything, it probably forced more national voters to get out there and vote. You surprised by that? Because I thought with Dirty Politics, even though it was, very much against the right, I thought it would have some effect on the polls, but it didn't. What do you see in that?
I actually had a lot of Labour supporters saying that they were just really troubled by what came out of the book, but that didn't sway them because there's a sense that all politicians are, impacted by this. We're all tarred by the same brush, really, and that's Dirty Politics. Even though it's quite the issues in it are quite significant, we are all labelled as politicians, so we're all impacted by Nikki Harvey's
But then again,
book.
if you're a key lover or you love the National Party, you're going to say this book is just politically motivated.
Yep.
If you're a Labour Party supporter, this is just going to whip up even more contempt you have for John Key on the Facebook page, on the Twitter sites. But I'm surprised it didn't make a difference, though, on both sides, aren't you?
Yeah, I think there's that, when I was talking a little bit earlier about the noise that was going on, it wasn't about policies, it wasn't about, the issues, it actually became about something other, and that didn't give any of us any opportunity to get the messages out that we needed to get out, I don't think.
Well, let's discuss the real issues facing Christchurch residents, and as I say, we'll leave the politics to the Wellington people. Let's discuss the housing crisis. There was an article in Friday's edition of the Christchurch Star saying house prices are starting to stabilise. Yep. Do you buy into that, or do you think we're still in incredibly tough times? Is it getting slightly better?
I don't know that it's getting slightly better. I mean, I think it's too early to tell. The people that we're seeing coming into the office, of course, are the ones most impacted by the housing crisis, so they're always going to be those most disadvantaged. There's still a lot of people that are overcrowded. There's still a lot of people who can't afford to buy a house, or the rents are still as extraordinary as they were, and we're not earning as much as, say, the folk in Auckland, but our rents are equivalent. I think we still need to do something to staunch the flow. Houses are starting to come online, but they're very slowly coming online, and the prices I would not call affordable. I don't think $600,000 and $700,000 homes are affordable. So there is still a long way to go. I think it's a signal of there is a lot of stuff that we really do need to deal with. I think we've got a bit of a ticking time bomb around, child poverty is a symptom of a society that is unequal. And I think that's kind of our big issue for the next 3 years, just addressing the gap between those who do have and those who don't.
Well, I want to pick you up on that because I agree, we have an issue with child poverty. But your leader, when he was giving his sermons, what it sounded like during his debates, there was nothing, it was like the white elephant in the room he was forgetting about, and that was parent responsibility. Why do we not hear so much about that?
Well, when you're talking
Is that because we realise that we have some deadbeat parents that are incapable of looking after their children, so we have to put them to one side and say what? But is throwing more cash at their benefits really the answer, though?
Well, I had a conversation with someone who said, why don't the parents just buy a box of Weet-Bix that'll feed the kids breakfast for a week? Why are we sending kids to school hungry? When you've got parents who actually are making choices about whether they pay the power bill or whether they feed the kids or whether they pay the rent, you've got people in really desperate straits. So when you're talking about, throwing more money at it, actually there's a whole range of things that need to happen. It's not a simple solution. But we are talking about people who live below the poverty line, can't afford to actually meet the basics. So money is one thing, but actually resolving...
But is giving them more money the answer, or is it saying, look, OK, you can't afford these food items, instead of upping their benefit, why not give them food vouchers? I was criticised for mentioning it on the radio, and I couldn't understand why. Isn't that one way to address the poverty issue? Give the parents food vouchers or some card system so when they go to Pack and Save, there are items on there they can buy. Giving them more money, it seems to me part of the problem is perhaps budgeting. Is giving more money to beneficiaries the answer?
It's partially the answer. When you're talking about people who need a food grant and it takes them 5 days to get a food grant, what are they going to do about feeding their kids in the meantime? We've got a fundamental problem with how we deal with people who are vulnerable and in those desperate straits. And yet money is part of the solution. Long term, it's actually about work and providing work that pays enough to meet your family's needs. And I don't know that our minimum wage...
You're agreeing with National now because they're against benefits, that they're more so for getting people into work.
And so are we. We are always saying that, but it has to be work that pays people enough to actually meet their family's needs. $14.25, working a 40-hour week, you know, you're barely going to cover your rent. You're not going to be able to put food on the table, pay your power bill, all those other costs. So it's about higher value wages, and it is about creating work. And I don't know... The government talked about 84,000 jobs in the last term. It didn't actually talk about the basic number of people who are unemployed has actually increased under National. And National has changed a lot of the conditions that people work under. So, you know...
So more people who go on invalids benefits, for argument's sake, they're not even in the employment category or unemployed category.
Right.
So I think you're right with that. That's a bit disingenuous. Look, we need to take a break, but I want to discuss some of the positive stuff happening in the East. And
great.
Boy, is there plenty of stuff. It finally feels like there's some kind of paradigm shift. We'll discuss New Brighton, we'll discuss QE2, the coast to coast, the saltwater pools. Stay with us. Welcome back to Lynched on CTV. My guest tonight is Poto Williams. Poto, let's discuss some of the positive stuff happening on the East. And I think it's important. It's always that fine balancing act, isn't it? But there is some great stuff happening. There's a sense of progress. There's a sense of New Brighton's finally getting somewhere. QE2 finally getting somewhere. What is your sense? Let's start with QE2. So now we've got a situation where the council has committed to at least that location of building, what is it, some kind of sports complex at QE2. But we're still wondering here if the ground is safe. I mean, what do you know?
Oh, not much more than you, really.
Does anybody?
No, well, look, they're still doing the testing on it, but at least they've made a commitment to it, which is great. And people are kind of going, yay, QE2. QE2's got a sentimental value for people. It's a great site too, because there were lots of things that happened outside of the complex that connected the community, all the walking groups and all the, you know, all the other things that went on. So I think that's a great site. If they go with that option, there won't be too many people unhappy with that. So yeah, I'm really happy about.
I was really surprised, and I was saying to my mother the other night, why are people so obsessed with swimming pools? But she said to me, Christopher, when you're a little kid, every weekend you'll be down at QE2 as well. And I totally forgot about that. But swimming for young kids is so important. So now I get it, I understand it.
Yeah.
It is pretty bad that the East doesn't have anything at the moment,
That's
really.
Right. That's right. And so many people learn how to swim in that complex that, you know, I've still got, you know, I've got friends that go over to, you know, some of the other complexes. It's not the same as being able to chuck the kids over the back fence with a couple of dollars to go and, you know, have an outing. You know, it'll be great to get that happening again.
The council has also committed some funding to legacy projects, haven't they, like the saltwater pool? So where are we at with that? They've said we'll give you X amount of dollars, but you're going to have to try and get private investors through the door. Do you think those private investors will commit to New Brighton?
There have been a lot of people who've put up their hands and said they're interested in looking at a, you know, conglomerate of people getting involved in there. I think that the council has actually said, yes, we'll commit money to this project is a huge step forward. People have been talking about saltwater pools for, I don't know, a lot longer than you and I have been around. And it's great to know that the council's committed to having a legacy project. So, yeah, I'm really comfortable that we're on a bit of a journey, and the dialogue will start to happen. I would just have to wait for people to come out of the woodwork and say, yeah, they want to be part of it.
Do you think they will, though? Because we've had what, one big announcement of an apartment complex going up in New Brighton. Is that the start of more, do you think, or is that still, do we still see that as an isolated investment? No,
look, I know that the council have already started to rezone the retail precinct within New Brighton, and I know that by 2016 there'll be some significant changes which will make things like the saltwater pool possible, and things like other retail options possible. It will change the way New Brighton actually sees its retail
I want to get
precinct.
your thoughts on this. There was a sense that the council's actually done quite a lot for New Brighton. They've got the library that's, in terms of generations, is fairly new. You've got the pier. They have tried. Is it up to the residents to make a better go of things? Because the mall has been dying for a long time, and is it too simplistic to blame the Westfields of this world on the fact of New Brighton's demise?
No, and I don't think the Westfield model is what we want for New Brighton. I think it's a significant and different.
Put a massive warehouse in the middle of the mall.
Well, hey, let's face it. Look, you know,
I'll go there.
Would you? Well, I don't know if that's exactly what we want for the New Brighton area. We've got 140,000 people coming to New Brighton over the summer. Now,
it is the crown jewels of the city, isn't it?
It is. So, but it needs to be dressed up in a different way. It is not the Palms. It's not, it's not Riccarton Mall. It is a significantly beautiful part of our city, and it needs to be dressed in a particular way that reflects that. It is also, we've got Coast to Coast coming there, as you know. It's an adventure place. It's, we've got water sports, we've got surf clubs, we've got a part of the city that's unique and different. So we need to actually deal with it in a different way. So, I always use the phrase, it's a funky part of Christchurch, and it is. It has a long-term history. Families who are born in New Brighton, stayed in New Brighton forever, often don't move. So it's got that history, but it's also got people who've got alternative ideas that live there. It makes it a different kind of place.
You see, does it actually need some form of a retail precinct, or do we need to think more creatively? I mean, you've got the Saturday markets there now, which is, on a great day, they go off. It is incredibly popular.
Yeah.
I mean, and then people moan about the winds during the winter, it's too cold. Do we need to think bigger? And do you think, though, that these legacy projects is the be-all and end-all to fix New Brighton? Are people going to go to a saltwater pool from, Burnside to New Brighton? Do we have to have something else there, though?
Yeah, one thing is not the answer. The fact that we've got not only the coastline, but we've got the estuary as well. Having ecotourism around that, regenerating a lot of that. We've got a significant amount of red zone in our wider east area now too. So we've got opportunities to actually develop, natural habitats, different types of way of recreation and sports, cycleways, just opportunities to move people in a different way. And having a destination is important. And I'm glad you
brought up the red zone area. Plenty of that in your electorate. Has Sarah moved fast enough to clear some of those houses? Because I used to live over that side of town. It was depressing going past and seeing that Kate Shepherd retirement village with graffiti there, still there. Thank God it's gone now. But I'm getting a sense that Sarah's left the East to its own devices. There was a community meeting there that I chaired. Some guy from Sarah turned up apparently and promised the earth and delivered nothing. I mean, has Sarah worked hard and fast enough for people on the East? You can be honest.
Look, I'll get myself into trouble if I'm honest. I wonder.
You paused.
I wonder.
You paused,
yeah,
I
did. I wonder if it may not have done more sooner. It is working now, and a lot is happening now. But it's really been left to members of our local community to actually do the beautifying of that area, and that's not appropriate. I mean, it's great that we've got people who are committed to doing that, but we expect that from our our recovery authority.
We've got tulips in there now. Have the tulips started springing up from ZB?
Oh, no. Where did you plant them?
Well, I planted them everywhere I could. Probably in illegal places too as well.
Yeah, well, I've got one in my garden, so perhaps you dropped one in my garden.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You can thank me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Potter Williams, really nice to see you. Congratulations.
Thanks.
We'll have you on the programme again. I really appreciate you coming into Lynched. Well, that's our show. Thank you so much for joining me on CTV. I'm back on Newstalk ZB tomorrow with Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalzell. But from me and all of us here at CTV, good night. Lynched on CTV was proudly brought to you by Christchurch's #1 dining offer, Sequoia 88, at the Redwood Hotel, a food concept unequalled.